After 15 years as a professional K-9 handler with the military, I finally achieved my dream. I purchased a modest 3-bedroom house on 5 acres of partially wooded land at the edge of the Oak Ridge subdivision. The property sat just within the community boundaries, but with enough distance to give me the privacy and space I needed for what I planned next, a small-scale training facility for security and service dogs. I had saved every penny during my service years for this exact purpose. My property featured a large fenced training yard with professional-grade equipment, agility courses, scent detection stations, and obstacle sets that mirrored what I had used during my military days. The kennels were top-of-the-line, spacious, climate-controlled, and secure enough to house my 5 personal security dogs, 3 German Shepherds named Ranger, Havoc, and Shield, plus 2 Belgian Malinois called Valor and Storm. These were not ordinary pets. Each animal had been selected for their exceptional temperament, intelligence, and working drive. I had personally trained them to military and police standards, capable of everything from perimeter security to search operations. Despite their formidable capabilities, they were impeccably disciplined. They would not move without command, would not bark without cause, and most importantly, were trained to contain threats without causing injury unless absolutely necessary. My mornings quickly settled into a peaceful routine. I would wake before dawn, brew coffee, and watch the sunrise from my back porch as the dogs completed their morning exercise regimen. The property was my sanctuary, exactly what I had worked my entire adult life to achieve. The neighbors seemed welcoming at first. Several stopped by with housewarming gifts during my first week, mostly baked goods and bottles of wine accompanied by curious questions about my background and plans for the property. I explained my K-9 training background and my small business plans, inviting them to meet my dogs under controlled circumstances. Most seemed impressed by how disciplined the animals were, standing at perfect attention or following complex commands with barely a whisper from me. Corinne Westfield appeared on my doorstep on the 5th day after I moved in. Her smile seemed forced as she extended a gift basket wrapped in cellophane and tied with an enormous blue bow. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," she said, her eyes darting past me to survey my living room. "I am the head of the neighborhood association. We are so pleased to have new neighbors, especially ones with such interesting pets." When I invited her to meet the dogs, her smile tightened. She maintained a rigid distance as Ranger approached for a friendly inspection. "My goodness," she said, clutching her designer purse closer to her chest. "They are certainly large, are they not? How many did you say you have?" "5," I replied, "all professionally trained security dogs." Corinne nodded stiffly, her eyes scanning my training yard with obvious disapproval. "Well, we do pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards in Oak Ridge. I am sure you will make the necessary adjustments to ensure your property remains presentable." She gestured vaguely toward my training equipment. "Some of that looks rather industrial for a residential neighborhood." I explained that my property was zoned to allow for the small training operation I planned to run, but Corinne seemed distracted, already making mental notes. As she left, she turned back with that same tight smile. "Do try to keep the noise down. We value our peace and quiet here in Oak Ridge." I dismissed her comments as the harmless preferences of someone perhaps too invested in neighborhood appearances. I had no idea those calculating eyes were already measuring my property against rules she had invented herself. Rules she intended to enforce regardless of legal standing. The first letter appeared in my mailbox 3 weeks after I moved in. The paper was expensive stationery with Oak Ridge Neighborhood Association, printed in bold letters across the top, though notably lacking any official letterhead, logo, or formal address. The contents were a list of supposed violations I had committed against neighborhood standards: unsightly training equipment visible from the road, excessive number of canines on a residential property, commercial activity in a residential zone, noise disturbance from animal training activities. The letter concluded with a demand that I remedy these violations within 7 days or face appropriate action from the association. It was signed simply Corinne Westfield, Association President. Something about the letter's tone struck me as odd. During my military career, I had learned to recognize the difference between legitimate authority and someone merely posturing. This letter reeked of the latter. I spent that evening researching the Oak Ridge development, county records, and property regulations. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. The original homeowners association had legally dissolved 5 years earlier after the development was completed. The developer had failed to properly register ongoing articles of incorporation with the state, and no one had bothered to renew them. Whatever association Corinne claimed to lead had no legal authority whatsoever. It was nothing more than a self-appointed committee with delusions of grandeur. I drafted a polite but firm response citing the relevant legal statutes regarding property rights, the absence of binding HOA covenants, and documentation that my property was correctly zoned for the limited training activities I conducted. I also included verification that my dogs were professionally trained, properly licensed, and had never generated a legitimate noise complaint. Corinne's response came not in writing but in person. She appeared at my door the following Saturday morning, her face flushed with indignation. "I received your letter," she said, practically spitting the words. "I do not appreciate your tone or your attempts to circumvent community standards." "There are no legally binding community standards," I replied calmly. "The HOA dissolved 5 years ago. Your association has no authority to impose rules or issue violations." Corinne's eyes narrowed. "We have maintained these standards for years without needing legal technicalities. Everyone else complies with our guidelines because they care about property values and neighborhood aesthetics. Your operation is an eyesore that will affect everyone's home values." "My property is well maintained, my business is properly licensed, and my animals are professionally trained," I countered. "There is nothing in county regulations that prohibits what I am doing." "We will see about that," she snapped before turning on her heel and marching back to her SUV. The campaign against me began in earnest after that confrontation. New letters arrived weekly, each more demanding than the last. Corinne began organizing concerned citizen meetings at her home, which I learned about when sympathetic neighbors slipped notes under my door warning me of her activities. My security cameras captured Corinne walking along my property line multiple times, photographing my training yard and kennels while talking animatedly on her phone. Twice, I observed her pointing out my property to strangers in business attire, likely real estate agents. She was attempting to convince that my presence was harming property values. The whisper campaign spread throughout the neighborhood. At the community mailboxes, conversations would stop abruptly when I approached. One brave neighbor, an elderly man named Frank who had initially seemed impressed by my dogs, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Just wanted to warn you," he said quietly. "Corinne is telling everyone your dogs are dangerous, claiming they bark all night and lunge at people walking past your property. I know it is not true, but some folks are believing her." I thanked him for the warning. That evening, I installed additional security cameras covering every approach to my property. Something in Corinne's escalating behavior triggered my security training instincts. She was building towards something, and I wanted to be prepared. My instincts proved correct when I encountered Corinne at the community park the following weekend. She was speaking to a group of neighbors I had never met, but fell silent when she spotted me. As I passed by, I heard her say loudly, "Some people just do not belong in civilized neighborhoods. This is not over until those dogs are gone." The warning was clear, but even with my security background and growing concerns, I never anticipated how far she would go to enforce her unauthorized authority. Tuesday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the K-9 demonstration I had promised the local elementary school months earlier. The school's principal had reached out after hearing about my background, asking if I would show the children how working dogs serve communities. I had spent weeks preparing Ranger and Valor for the event, ensuring they were comfortable around large groups of excited children. I loaded the two dogs into my SUV at 8:30 a.m., leaving my other three dogs, Havoc, Shield, and Storm, in their secure kennels on the property. They had access to water, climate-controlled shelter, and a secure run area, standard accommodations for working K-9s accustomed to holding positions for extended periods. The demonstration went beautifully. The children were enthralled as Ranger demonstrated scent detection, finding hidden objects throughout the gymnasium. Valor showed off his discipline by holding a downstay despite balls and toys being rolled past him. The question session afterward ran long, with excited children asking everything from "Do the dogs wear bulletproof vests?" to "Can they catch bad guys?" My phone vibrated in my pocket just after noon. The security system had detected motion along my property's perimeter fence. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to check the alert, expecting to see a delivery driver or perhaps a neighbor walking past. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. The security footage showed Corinne leading three men I had never seen before through my side gate. She moved with purpose, gesturing toward my training equipment as the men nodded. One carried bolt cutters. Two others began unloading empty space in the beds of their pickup trucks parked on the street. I turned up the volume on my phone to hear Corinne's voice clearly through the security system's audio. "Just remove everything that is not permanently attached. He cannot prove who took it. We will consider it cleanup of abandoned equipment on community property." My heart raced as I watched them begin loading my specialized training equipment, custom hurdles, scent detection materials, and agility courses worth thousands of dollars into their trucks. I was already moving toward the exit, calling hurried apologies to the principal as I explained I had an emergency at home. But what happened next on the security feed made me stop in my tracks. The group approached the reinforced kennels where Havoc, Shield, and Storm rested. Corinne pointed to the secure locks. "Those two. If the animals get loose, animal control will have to come. That will be the end of his little operation." What these trespassers failed to understand was the nature of the animals they were approaching. These were not pets. They were highly trained security professionals with specific protocols for unauthorized entry when their handler was absent. The moment the first man attempted to cut the kennel lock, all three dogs executed their security training perfectly. No barking, no frantic movement, just the silent, coordinated containment maneuver they had been trained to perform. They positioned themselves strategically, cornering the intruders against the storage shed. Their bodies formed a semicircle, teeth exposed in warning postures, eyes locked on the trespassers, but maintaining the precise distance their training demanded. Through my car speakers, I could hear Corinne's reaction transform from smug authority to panicked trespasser. "Call them off! Call them off!" she screamed, despite the fact that the dogs had not made a sound nor moved closer than their training permitted. They were simply holding position, preventing escape, exactly as they were trained to do. "They are going to attack us," one of the men yelled, dropping the bolt cutters with a clang. "Call the police," Karen shrieked, fumbling with her phone. "These vicious animals have us trapped." I was already speeding home, watching the live feed whenever traffic allowed. Despite my concern, I could not help but feel a surge of pride in my dog's perfect execution of their training. Not one had attempted to bite or even make contact with the intruders. They were simply containing the threat until I arrived, the highest testament to their discipline and training. I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later to find two police cruisers already on scene, their blue lights painting rhythmic patterns across my property. Officer Ramirez, a veteran cop I recognized from community events, stood at a cautious distance from the storage shed, where my three dogs still held their containment formation around Karen and her accomplices. Karen's face was streaked with mascara tears, her normally perfect hair disheveled as she spotted me exiting my vehicle. "There he is," she shrieked, pointing dramatically. "Arrest him! His vicious dogs attacked us." Officer Ramirez approached me with professional caution. "Sir, we received a call about aggressive dogs trapping people on your property. Can you control these animals?" "Absolutely," I replied calmly. I walked toward the scene and gave the clear command in a firm voice. "Shield, Havoc, Storm, release and return." All three dogs immediately broke their formation and trotted to my side, sitting at perfect attention beside me. No barking, no aggression, just precise obedience that drew raised eyebrows from both officers. "Those are not normal dogs," Officer Ramirez observed. "No, sir, they are not. They are professionally trained security K9s, and they were responding to intruders on my property while I was away." I pulled out my phone. "I have the entire incident on security footage if you would like to see what actually happened here." The lead officer reviewed the video on my phone, his expression changing as he watched the clear evidence of trespassing and attempted theft. The footage showed Karen leading the group onto my property, directing them to remove equipment, and attempting to breach the secure kennels. "Ma'am," Officer Ramirez addressed Karen, whose tears had mysteriously dried as she watched him view the evidence, "you are on video trespassing, attempting to remove property, and trying to tamper with secure containment facilities. These animals responded exactly as they are trained to do. They contained a threat without causing injury." "We are the neighborhood association," Karen protested, her voice climbing an octave. "We have authority to enforce standards and remove violations." "Do you have documentation of this authority?" the officer asked. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she settled on. "We have been the neighborhood association for years. Everyone knows this." I provided the officers with copies of my property deed, business license, and the documentation proving the original HOA had legally dissolved years ago. "Officer, I am a former military K9 handler. These dogs are trained to military standards. Had they wanted to harm these individuals, they would be in an ambulance right now instead of standing here without a scratch." The second officer, who had been inspecting the dogs from a respectful distance, nodded in agreement. "I worked with the K9 unit before transferring to patrol. These animals are showing better discipline than some of our department dogs." Karen's accomplices, looking increasingly uncomfortable, began distancing themselves from her both physically and verbally. "She told us this was authorized," one muttered. "Said it was official HOA business to clean up an eyesore property. She said we were doing community service," another added. That this guy was violating codes and refused to comply. Corinne's face flushed deep red. They are lying, I never. This is not. You cannot possibly. Ma'am, Officer Ramirez interrupted firmly, please provide your identification. We need to take statements from everyone involved. As the officers escorted Corinne and her enforcers to the patrol cars for formal statements, she continued her narrative of victimhood, shouting about dangerous animals and neighborhood authority, while the evidence of her crimes played in crystal-clear video quality on my phone. Before departing, Officer Ramirez pulled me aside. You will want to file for a restraining order immediately. This type rarely gives up after one failure. He glanced at my dogs, now calmly waiting by the porch. Those are impressive animals. If you ever consider training seminars for our department, let me know. I watched the patrol cars pull away, knowing this confrontation was far from over. Corinne's final glare through the rear window of the police cruiser told me everything I needed to know. This was just the beginning. The following morning, I sat across from Patricia Hernandez, an attorney specializing in property disputes and harassment cases. She reviewed my security footage for the third time, shaking her head in disbelief. This is not just about trespassing, she explained, pausing the video at the moment Corinne directed her accomplice toward the kennel locks. This is breaking and entering, attempted theft, and filing a false police report. The fact that she specifically targeted the kennels suggests intent to release animals she herself characterized as dangerous, which could potentially support additional charges of reckless endangerment. I nodded, but my concerns extended beyond criminal charges. I need to protect both my property and my animals from future incidents. These dogs are my livelihood and my family. Patricia understood immediately. Together, we developed a comprehensive strategy that went far beyond simply letting the criminal justice system run its course. First, we submitted formal requests for temporary restraining orders against Corinne and all three of her accomplices. The security footage made these nearly automatic approvals. Next, we commissioned professional evaluations of my dogs from 3 separate K-9 training experts, 2 former police handlers, and 1 civilian specialist in security dogs. All 3 provided sworn statements about the appropriate security response my dogs had demonstrated. These animals showed exceptional training and restraint by containing rather than engaging with intruders. Their response was proportional and appropriate for secure property protection. The most surprising development came when neighbors began contacting me privately. With Corinne now facing criminal charges, people felt emboldened to share their own experiences. Frank, the elderly neighbor who had warned me earlier, brought over a file folder containing 3 years of threatening letters from Corinne's association, including demands for unapproved fines for everything from unapproved mailbox design to excessive holiday decorations. She collected over $500 from me before I researched and discovered she had no authority, Frank admitted shamefully. Many neighbors just paid to avoid confrontation. Other residents shared similar stories: unauthorized fines collected, threatening letters, property photographed without permission. A pattern emerged of someone playing authority figure without any legal standing. The most concerning reports came from a real estate agent who confirmed Corinne had actively interfered with property sales by telling potential buyers about undesirable elements in the neighborhood, specifically targeting homes whose owners had opposed her rules. My attorney's research uncovered something even more damning. Corinne had faced restraining orders in her previous neighborhood for similar behavior before moving to Oak Ridge 3 years ago. She has a pattern, Patricia explained. She identifies neighborhoods with dissolved or inactive HOAs, establishes herself as the unofficial authority, and uses intimidation to control residents. Most people never question her authority because the paperwork and confrontation seem more trouble than just complying. The most definitive evidence came from county records, official documentation proving the original HOA legally dissolved when developers completed the project. An affidavit from the development company confirmed they had transferred no authority to any subsequent community organization. As the evidence mounted, I worked with Officer Ramirez to organize a community information session about property rights and legal authority. Meanwhile, my dogs received additional training focused on property protection protocols, not because they needed it after their flawless performance, but because it gave me peace of mind knowing they were constantly improving their already impressive skills. This was not about revenge. It was about protection, creating such an airtight case that neither Karen nor anyone else would dare trespass on my property again. 2 weeks after the incident, Karen somehow convinced the community center manager to let her hold an emergency neighborhood meeting to address the dangerous dog situation endangering residents. Flyers appeared on every doorstep dramatizing the vicious animal attack and calling for community action against dangerous breeding and training operations in residential areas. The community center's main room was packed beyond capacity when I arrived, nearly every household in Oak Ridge represented. Karen stood at the podium in front, her voice quivering with practiced victimhood as she described being mauled and terrorized by attack dogs running loose in our peaceful neighborhood. She did not notice me enter with my attorney, Officer Ramirez, 3 uniformed K-9 officers from the county sheriff's department, and my audiovisual equipment. We quietly set up in the back as she continued her dramatic narrative. "These dangerous animals could attack your children next," Karen declared, her voice breaking for effect. "No one is safe as long as military-grade attack dogs are allowed in our family neighborhood." When she finally paused for breath, Patricia rose from her seat. "Before we continue discussing dogs that supposedly attacked but somehow left no injuries, I believe we should address the actual legal issues at hand." The room fell silent as all heads turned. Karen's face froze in mid-sentence as she spotted me standing beside the projector. "For those who do not know me," I began calmly, "I am the homeowner Karen is discussing. I am a former military K-9 handler with 15 years of professional experience. The dogs on my property are trained security animals with perfect safety records." I nodded to Officer Ramirez, who stepped forward. "As the responding officer to this incident, I can confirm that no attack occurred. What the security footage shows is a professional containment response to trespassers attempting to steal property and potentially release animals." The security footage began playing on the wall, crystal clear evidence of Karen leading her group onto my property, directing them to remove equipment, and attempting to breach the kennels. The room filled with murmurs as neighbors watched Karen's actual behavior rather than her fabricated version. Patricia then introduced the county clerk who verified the HOA's dissolution 7 years prior. Former board members confirmed they had transferred no authority to Karen's committee. The K-9 officers provided professional assessments of the security footage. These dogs demonstrated exceptional training. They contained without attacking, better restraint than many police K-9s would show. As each expert spoke, Karen's face flushed deeper red. When she attempted to interrupt with accusations, neighbors she had once intimidated stood to share their own stories of harassment. She fined me $300 for planting unauthorized flowers in my own garden, one woman stated. She threatened to put a lien on my house because my trash cans were visible from the street for more than 4 hours, another added. The meeting's tone shifted dramatically when I calmly proposed establishing a legitimate homeowners association with proper legal registration, transparent financial accounting, and democratically elected leadership. We can create something that actually serves this community rather than controls it, I suggested. The vote that followed was nearly unanimous, with Karen and her 3 accomplices still facing criminal charges, the only opposition. As the newly formed legitimate association elected its first board, notably without Karen, there was a palpable sense of community reclamation. Neighbors who had previously avoided each other now exchanged contact information and made plans for a proper community event. I think we should start with something that brings us all together, suggested Frank, the elderly neighbor who had first warned me about Karen. Perhaps a community demonstration day where we can all learn about these impressive animals that exposed what was really happening in our neighborhood. Karen stormed out before the meeting concluded, her authority fantasy undone by legal reality and community solidarity. As she pushed through the exit doors, I caught her final glare, a look that mixed humiliation with stubborn defiance. Despite everything, I suspected we had not seen the last of her. Justice arrived through various channels over the following months. Karen and her accomplices accepted plea deals rather than face trial with the damning video evidence. Their sentences included 12 months of probation, community service hours, and restitution payments for the damaged training equipment. The court issued permanent restraining orders keeping them at minimum distance from both my property and dogs. Karen listed her house for sale within weeks of the sentencing hearing. The moving trucks arrived on a Saturday morning, loaded with designer furniture and the trappings of the authority she had fabricated. She did not make eye contact with any neighbors during the process, and no farewell parties were thrown in her honor. Meanwhile, our newly established, properly registered homeowners association focused on actual community needs rather than aesthetic control. The first official action of the elected board was to approve funds for a community park improvement project, something Karen had opposed for years because it would attract undesirable elements to the neighborhood. I secured all proper business permits for my K-9 training operation, though these were never actually required for the limited work conducted on private property. With community support behind me, I expanded my training services to include basic obedience classes for neighborhood pets, a Sunday afternoon tradition that quickly became popular among Oak Ridge residents. The transformation in neighborhood dynamics proved most remarkable. My once feared property became a point of community pride when I hosted the demonstration day Frank had suggested. Neighbors watched in amazement as Ranger, Havoc, Shield, Valor, and Storm demonstrated search and rescue operations, assistance training for disabled handlers, and the precise control that characterizes elite working animals. Children who had once been told to avoid the dangerous doghouse now asked their parents if they could visit the hero dogs. Several teenagers expressed interest in K-9 handling careers after watching the demonstrations, leading me to develop a youth mentorship program focused on responsible animal training and handling. Most satisfying was the change in real estate patterns. The property that Karen had claimed destroyed neighborhood values became its most distinctive positive feature. Local real estate agents actually began mentioning proximity to the professional K-9 training property as a selling point for security-conscious buyers. 6 months after Karen's departure, Officer Ramirez contacted me with an unexpected opportunity. The police department had received funding for an expanded K-9 unit and needed qualified trainers. Your dog's performance that day impressed everyone in the department, he explained. We would like to contract with you to help train our new handlers. As I watched my dogs run through their morning exercises 1 year after the confrontation, I reflected not on victory over Karen, but on the importance of standing firm against intimidation, knowing your rights, and the power of truth when brought into the light. My property remained exactly as I had envisioned it, a peaceful training ground for exceptional animals, now with the added benefit of a supportive community that recognized their value. The German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois moving in perfect formation across the training yard were not just security assets. They had become symbols of justice in our small corner of the world. They had contained a threat to our community without causing harm, a perfect metaphor for how knowledge, preparation, and standing your ground can overcome even the most determined intimidation.